This is from Silas Marner by George Eliot, published 1861, in which the townspeople of Raveloe discuss what has become of poor Silas Marner's gold. The next morning, the whole village was excited by the story of the robbery, and Godfrey, like everyone else, was occupied in gathering and discussing news about it, and in visiting the stone pits. The rain had washed away all possibility of distinguishing footmarks, but a close investigation of the spot had disclosed, in the direction opposite to the village, a tinder box, with a flint and steel, half sunk in the mud. It was not Silas's tinder box, for the only one he had ever had was still standing on his shelf. And the inference generally accepted was that the tinder box in the ditch was somehow connected with the robbery. A small minority shook their heads and intimated their opinion that it was not a robbery to have much light thrown on by tinder boxes, that Master Marner's tale had a queer look with it, and that such things had been known as a man's doing himself a mischief and then setting the justice to look for the doer. But when questioned closely as to their grounds for this opinion, and what Master Marner had to gain by such false pretenses, they only shook their heads as before and observed there was no knowing what some folks counted gain. Moreover, that everybody had a right to their own opinions, grounds or no grounds, and that the weaver, as everybody knew, was partly crazy. Mr. Macy, though he joined in the defense of Marner against all suspicions of deceit, also pooh-poohed the tinder box. Indeed, repudiated it as a rather impious suggestion, tending to imply that everything must be done by human hands, and that there was no power which could make away with the guineas without moving the bricks. Nevertheless, he turned round rather sharply on Mr. Tookie when the zealous deputy, feeling that this was a view of the case peculiarly suited to the parish clerk, carried it still further, and doubted whether it was right to inquire into a robbery at all when the circumstances were so mysterious. While these discussions were going on amongst the group outside of the Rainbow, a higher consultation was being carried on within, under the presidency of Mr. Crackenthorp, the rector, assisted by Squire Cass and other substantial parishioners. It had just occurred to Mr. Snell, the landlord, he being, as he observed, a man accustomed to put two and two together, to connect with the tinder box, which, as deputy constable, he himself had had the honorable distinction of finding certain recollections of a pedlar who had called to drink at the house about a month before, and had actually stated that he carried a tinder box about with him to light his pipe. Here surely was a clue to be followed out. And as memory, when duly impregnated with ascertained facts, is sometimes surprisingly fertile, Mr. Snell gradually recovered a vivid impression of the effect produced on him by the pedlar's countenance and conversation. He had a look with his eye, which fell unpleasantly on Mr. Snell's sensitive organism. To be sure, he didn't say anything particular, no, except that about the tinder box. But it isn't what a man says, it's the way he says it. Moreover, he had a swarthy foreignness of complexion which boded little honesty. Did he wear earrings? Mr. Crackenthorp wished to know, having some acquaintance with foreign customs. Well, stay, let me see, said Mr. Snell, like a docile clairvoyant, who would really not make a mistake if she could help it. After stretching the corners of his mouth and contracting his eyes as if he were trying to see the earrings, he appeared to give up the effort and said, well, he'd got earrings in his box to sell, so it's natural to suppose he might wear 'em. But he called at every house almost in the village. There's somebody else mayhap saw him in his ears, though I can't take him upon me rightly to say. Mr. Snell was quite correct in his surmise, that somebody else would remember the pedlar's earrings. For on the spread of inquiry among villagers, it was stated with gathering emphasis that the person had wanted to know whether the pedlar wore earrings in his ears, and an impression was created that a great deal depended on eliciting this fact. Of course, everyone who heard the question not having any distinct image of the pedlar as without earrings, immediately had an image of him with earrings, larger or smaller as the case might be. And the image was presently taken for a vivid recollection, so that the glazier's wife, a well-intentioned woman, not given to lying, and whose house was among the cleanest in the village, was ready to declare as sure as ever she meant to take the sacrament the very next Christmas that was ever coming, that she had seen big earrings, in the shape of the young moon, in the pedlar's 2 ears. While Ginny Oates, the cobbler's daughter, being a more imaginative person, stated not only that she had seen them too, but that they made her blood creep, as it did at that very moment while there she stood. Also, by way of throwing further light on this clue of the tinderbox, a collection was made of all the articles purchased from the pedlar at various houses and carried to the Rainbow to be exhibited there. In fact, there was a general feeling in the village that for the clearing up of this robbery there must be a great deal done at the Rainbow, and that no man need offer his wife an excuse for going there while it was the scene of severe public duties. Some disappointment was felt, and perhaps a little indignation also, when it became known that Silas Marner, on being questioned by the squire and the parson, had retained no other recollection of the pedlar than that he had called at his door but had not entered his house, having turned away at once when Silas, holding the door ajar, had said he wanted nothing. This had been Silas's testimony, though he clutched strongly at the idea of the pedlar's being the culprit, if only because it gave him a definite image of a whereabout for his gold, after it had been taken away from its hiding place. He could see it now in the pedlar's box. But it was observed with some irritation in the village that anybody but a blind creature like Marner would have seen the man prowling about. For how came he to leave his tinderbox in the ditch close by if he hadn't been lingering there? Doubtless he had made his observations when he saw Marner at the door. Anybody might know, and only look at him, that the weaver was a half-crazy miser. It was a wonder the pedlar hadn't murdered him. Men of that sort with rings in their ears had been known for murders often and often. There had been one tried at the Sizes not so long ago, but what there were people living who could remembered it. Godfrey Cass, indeed, entering the Rainbow during one of Mr. Snell's frequently repeated recitals of his testimony, had treated it lightly, stating that he himself had bought a penknife of the pedlar and thought him a merry, grinning fellow enough. It was all nonsense, he said, about the man's evil looks. But this was spoken of in the village as the random talk of youth, as it was only Mr. Snell who had seen something odd about the pedlar. On the contrary, there were at least a dozen who were ready to go before Justice Mallam and give in much more striking testimony than any the landlord could furnish. It was to be hoped Mr. Godfrey would not go to Tarley and throw cold water on what Mr. Snell said there, and so prevent the justice from drawing up a warrant. He was suspected of intending this when after midday he was seen setting off on horseback in the direction of Tarley.